Good afternoon, my Real News Midday TV family. Welcome back to the channel for another news update. And in the news this afternoon, VAS pushing for public education campaign to help reduce the carnage on roads. A share of the millions of dollars collected in traffic ticket fines could be used for a major public education campaign aimed at stemming the carnage on the nation's roads if Darrell VAS gets his wish. VAS, the Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport, described the number of road crashes and fatalities as a national emergency, saying last week that the situation is getting from bad to worse and needs an immediate response through a properly structured public education campaign. There's no way that we can continue on this path in relation to loss of lives and the impact on families and our infrastructure, hospital services, etc., which is a national emergency, VAS told a press conference at his Trafalgar Road offices in St. Andrew last week, pointing out that while the 192 deaths recorded since the start of the year is 13% less than 205 recorded for the same period last year, VAS stressed that this is still totally unacceptable. He lamented that based on his inquiries, there is no budget allocated to the Transport Ministry for public education and other activities surrounding road safety. VAS noted that the revenue earned from traffic fines are normally distributed between the Ministry of National Security, which gets 42% of the funds, and the Ministry of Justice, which gets 18%, while the balance goes to the Consolidated Fund through the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. I made a simple recommendation out of that 100%. The Ministry of Transport must get an allocation. It was accepted, and the Permanent Secretary is awaiting a draft cabinet submission to see exactly what the recommendation has been in relation to the allocation, VAS said, noting that in excess of $600 million in traffic ticket fines were collected between January 1 and June 2 this year. VAS said a share of up to 25% could fund a properly structured response to what is taking place on the roads. He said the funds would not have to be used for public education only, and could include the provision of helmets for motorcyclists, as he made reference to Prime Minister Andrew Holness's plan to distribute 10,000 helmets to motorcyclists. If those 10,000 were procured and used, he said some of the deaths in recent weeks could have been prevented. VAS said the plan is to put in place a long-term campaign and not the Transport Ministry finding $5 million here and another ministry finding $10 million here and running the campaign for 3 months and then it's all over. You're talking about something that has to be sustained, and a plan in what is the message that we're going to get into the psyche of the people, that when they get behind the wheel, the first thing that they remember before they move off is what they saw vividly on that screen on the highway, what they saw in the television commercials in relation to something that would get them to say, you know something, I better take it easy today, he said. VAS said that to ensure the sustainability of the intervention, the government may need international assistance from organizations that do this every day and have seen the results. I look forward to the reallocation, which will allow us to move very fast, but we cannot wait on that. We have to find other ways and means to be able to start the process, getting the solution in conjunction with the police to stem the deaths on the roads, he said. Bobby Brown charged after Machete attack. 47-year-old Courtney Anderson, known as Bobby Brown, a construction worker from Whitehall Tollgate in Clarendon, was charged with wounding with intent following an incident last Tuesday. According to the Maypen police, around 8:30 a.m., Anderson got into an altercation with another man. During the clash, Anderson allegedly used a machete to chop the man on the left side of his neck. He then reportedly used a stone to inflict further injuries. The injured man reported the attack to the police, leading to Anderson's arrest and subsequent charges. Supreme Court quashes decision, orders Prime Minister to hear gas station construction appeal. Prime Minister Andrew Holness, as the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, who was the defendant in a claim, has been ordered by the Supreme Court to hear and determine an appeal brought by Charlie's Windsor House Limited challenging a June 2019 decision by the Town and the Country Planning Authority. The TCPA had refused to grant an application to the claimant for planning permission to construct a gas station and a convenience store at 9 Herb McKinley Drive, Kingston 6. The claimant had also applied to the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation to grant a planning permission, but the application was also refused. An appeal was made by the claimant to the defendant against both decisions, but the defendant dismissed the appeal on October 25, 2020. In May 2021, the claimant took the matter to the Supreme Court, seeking administrative orders and declaratory relief. The claimant contended that the decision or finding that the defendant made was unlawful, unreasonable, irrational, and illogical, and thereby null and void. The contentions were that the defendant gave no reasons or adequate reasons for the decision. The claimant contended that the defendant made a mistake of fact in its finding that the said property was in a predominantly residential area. The claimant stated further that there was no appeal procedure set out in the TCP Act to challenge the decision of the minister responsible for town and country planning, who is the defendant. The claimant asked the court to determine whether the defendant erred in law in arriving at his decision and whether there was a common law duty which is cast on the defendant to produce reasons for his decision. A meeting was held on May 21, 2019, and at the meeting, the TCPA refused the planning permission. Dissatisfied with the outcome, the claimant lodged an appeal with the defendant, who appointed Darrell Vaz, the then minister with a portfolio responsibility for economic growth and job creation, to hear, receive, and examine the evidence on the appeal, which was heard on November 26, 2019. The claimant was advised by letter dated October 25, 2020 that the appeal was dismissed. The defendant averred that Vaz heard the appeal, after which a minister's brief was prepared to provide him with a written report of the findings and recommendations for his determination. The defendant stated further that any failure of the defendant to hear the appeal himself and after the expiration of the 21-day period from the appointment of the minister did not render the appeal proceedings and/or any decision resulting therefrom invalid or null and void. The defendant maintained that there was no legal duty cast on him to provide reasons for his refusal of the appeal. After hearing legal arguments, Justice Anne-Marie Nemhard ruled last month that the court accepted the submissions from attorney-at-law Trudean Dixon Frith, who represented the claimant, that the decision and the finding of the defendant do not condescend to provide particulars of the reasons for the decision, and that the failure to give reasons in the circumstances of this case renders the decision unreasonable, irrational, and illogical. The court said it was of the view that an order of certiorari, a writ or order by which a higher court receives a case tried in a lower court, ought to be granted to quash the decision and the finding of the defendant. Nemhard granted the order quashing the October 2020 decision and the finding of the defendant. The matter was remitted for the defendant to hear and determine the appeal within the timeline stipulated under the TCP Act. The claimant, which was also represented by Alison Mitchell, instructed by Don Cox, did not get an order of mandamus to compel the defendant to allow the appeal or the declaratory order that the decision and the finding of the defendant was null, void, and of no effect. Attorneys at law Romario Miller and Rochelle Duncan, instructed by the Director of State Proceedings, represented the defendant. Guys, thank you for watching. See you this evening at 6 p.m. for another news update.